In this video, I want to run through the process of using a 35mm SLR film camera, from choosing a film to understanding a few things on the camera and actually going out and shooting a full roll of 35mm film. So film photography has obviously gotten very popular again over the past few years. I got my first film camera about 3 or 4 years ago now, and I've loved it ever since. It was a medium format Yashica matte, by the way, fully mechanical, so I dove straight into the deep end when it comes to film photography. Fully mechanical camera, no light meter. It's a big learning curve, but very enjoyable at the same time. I know a lot of you guys are also into film photography, whether you've been doing it for years, or maybe you're just thinking about getting your very first film camera. This video is probably more for the latter. You guys who have just got a new film camera, or maybe some of you who are thinking about getting a new film camera, something like my Nikon FE, which is sitting right up here. So I just wanted to explain the process of using that camera, from buying the film to taking the actual shots, and hopefully it will give you a bit of confidence for your first roll, or your second or third, or whatever number of rolls you've shot at this point. First things first, you need some film. There are two main types of film, 35mm and 120, or medium format. I have no idea what this film is, by the way. It came in a little Christmas film box that Christina got me, and it seems to be the only roll of 35mm that I have left. So yeah, that's what we're using for demonstration purposes today. Just make sure you buy a roll which says 35mm like this one. Then you can choose between either colour film or black and white film. That's totally up to you. Let's say you want some colour, then obviously it depends on how much you want to spend. Kodak Gold 200 is my go-to in 35mm. It's cheaper than most other colour films and looks great. It also has an ISO of 200, which allows you to shoot handheld in most conditions. The higher the ISO of the film, the higher your shutter speed can be to expose things correctly. It doesn't really matter on nice sunny days, but if you shoot in low light conditions, this can make a big difference. The higher ISO films will tend to have more grain in your images, which, if you like grain, is fine. If you prefer a cleaner image, then maybe not so much. It's kind of the same as a digital camera, really, if you think about it. If you were always to shoot at 800 ISO on your digital camera, for example, you would never need to lower your shutter speed or your aperture as much to expose the scene or subject properly. So now that you've got yourself a roll of film, it's time to load it into the camera. So all 35mm film will look like this. This is your film canister right here, and this is part of the film negative itself hanging out here. Now, with pretty much all SLR film cameras, loading film is pretty much the same unless you have a Leica or maybe another niche camera that's slightly different. I'm assuming if you're quite new to film photography, or this is your first camera we're talking about, you probably don't have a Leica, but if you do, congrats. That's kind of like your first car being a Lamborghini. Anyway, loading the film. So first you need to pop open the back of the camera. On my Nikon FE, to do that, I have to pull this little tab back and then pull up on this rewind knob here. It will pull up off the body of the camera first, and then you just need to pull it a little bit more and you should hear a click and the back door will pop open. And now you can see the insides of a 35mm film camera. So to load the film, first set the film canister into the film chamber here. You may need to wiggle it a little or rotate it, and you will feel it slot into the chamber nicely. Then push the rewind knob back down. Again, you may need to turn it round a little before it slots down in perfectly. Next, pull enough of the film out of the canister so you can then slot the end of the film into the little gap in the take-up spool. You may need to slightly wind the film advance lever to spin the spool round so you can push the film into the little slot. Once the film is in the slot, you can then slowly wind the take-up spool using the film advance lever right here. You will be able to see the film wrap around the take-up spool. It should pull itself straight, with these little teeth here slotting into the holes in the film, and the film lining up with these metal marks here. Just wind it a little, making sure that all is looking straight, and then you can close the back door. You can then fire the shutter once, as this part of the film has already been exposed to light, so you aren't really wasting a shot. Then advance the film lever once again, and this time keep an eye on the rewind knob over here. It should turn when you advance the film. If it does, then you've done things correctly. If not, you may have to turn it a little and see if it locks in place, or you may need to open the back door again and check what's wrong. After this though, you just need to set the film ISO on your camera dial here. So I load at Kodak Gold 200, so I will set this dial to 200, which tells the camera what ISO the film is, and will allow me to shoot in auto mode and get the correct exposure. If you've been watching many film photography videos, you may often hear of people overexposing by a stop or two on their film camera, and an easy way to do this is just to tell your camera that the ISO of the film is lower than it actually is. So with Kodak Gold 200 for example, you would normally put in 200, but if I change it to 100, then the camera will essentially be overexposing every photo by one stop. But I won't confuse you too much with that stuff for now. Okay, let's get into actually going out and shooting some photos. So just a quick heads up, the first shot you take on the roll of film may have some film burn. This is completely normal because when you load the film, some of it does get exposed to light, so just be mindful of that. When I'm taking the first photo on a roll, I will often take a shot of the same scene twice if I really like it, just in case the first one has some of that film burn. It actually can look really nice at times if you get lucky with your framing. When shooting film, you have to expose it to light for a short period of time, and this will then burn the image onto the film negative. The setting you or the camera pick when taking the photo determine how long the film will be exposed to light. When shooting with an SLR film camera, things can vary a little depending on the exact camera that you have. If your camera has auto mode, which most SLRs do have, then you can use aperture priority and let the camera choose the shutter speed to expose the photo, which makes things quite easy. On my Nikon FE, I do this by turning this dial here to auto. Now when I go to shoot something, the light meter will give me a reading inside the viewfinder which I can see, telling me what shutter speed it's going to use to expose the scene correctly. If I adjust my aperture, this shutter speed value will change accordingly to expose the scene. If your camera doesn't have auto mode, then there will be a few more steps you need to take before you actually can take a photo. Your camera may still have a light meter though, and if you look through the viewfinder, it may show you on the side that the scene is being overexposed by a stop or underexposed by two stops. It will then be up to you to adjust the settings on your camera to make sure that the exposure sits somewhere in the middle or wherever it needs to be for you to expose the scene properly. If your camera has no light meter at all, then it's completely up to you to meter the scene. You may have seen me do this in videos where I'm using my Yashica mat here because it has no light meter, so I use an app on my phone called Light Meter. I'll not bore you in this video with how you meter scenes on that app, but I'll put a link up here to an older video I did explaining exactly how I meter for film photos. Just make sure if you do have to use an app like this that you err on the side of overexposing a little bit, because film does a lot better with retaining highlight detail than it does with shadow detail. So if you're not sure, slightly err on the side of overexposure, it'll definitely get you better results. So now that you have an idea of how to shoot, it's really just time to give it a go and see how things go. You will definitely make mistakes, but after it you will understand your camera a bit more, and with each roll going forward you will get better and have more of an understanding about exposure and whether your light meter is working correctly or not, because with these old film cameras you just never can be 100% until you try it out for yourself. Most cameras will have this little glass circle with a number in it. This shows you how many shots you've taken. Once you get to 36 or maybe 37 depending on how you loaded the film, that will be the end of the roll. The film advance lever will also stop advancing, so if you're near the end and it does this, don't push it hard thinking it's stuck or you could damage the camera or the roll or both. It's time to wind the film back and take it out. Most cameras will have a little button at the bottom like this. Push it and then use the rewind lever here to wind the film back in. there will be a little arrow showing you which direction to wind the film. This can take a few seconds, so keep winding until you hear a click or a snap sound, and then there will be less resistance after this, and this is how you know that the film has been wound back fully into the canister. Now just use the rewind knob like we did before loading the film to open the back door and take your film out. You might be wondering why the film is still hanging out of the film cartridge here. Just completely ignore that. I just used this roll to show the purpose and then winded it back so I can use it at a later date. When you do it, all the film should be winded back into the cartridge at this point. Now that you've finished shooting the roll of film, it's time to process and scan those photos. Just a little heads up, if you aren't immediately dropping your film off at a lab or developing it yourself, make sure to store the film in a little canister, put it into the fridge, because it just preserves the film. I don't know too much about the ins and outs of that, but I've heard multiple times that you should store your film in the fridge. So that's what I've done, and it's worked well for me so far. I would personally recommend sending your film to a lab to process and scan, because they know what they're doing. You can find a lab maybe in your local area or one that you can post your film to. If you're not sure how to find one, then maybe look at some film photographers that you follow. Oftentimes they'll tag the lab that they use, and if they're happy with the results, then you probably will be too. So yeah, it's quick and easy, it doesn't cost too much, and if you find a good one, I'm sure you'll be pretty happy with the results. And then you have the anxious but also exciting wait to see what comes back from the lab. On another little note, always make sure to get the lab to send your film scans back to you instead of disposing of them, because you can always rescan these at a later date if you don't like your scans, or if you want to get a really big scan for a big print, for example. And it's just nice to have them. So yeah, that's the process of using a 35mm SLR film camera to take film photos. If you're watching this before you actually shoot your first roll of film, or if you're very early on in your film shooting process, then that may seem a bit overwhelming, all the stuff I'm kind of talking about in this video. It does get a lot easier, and the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. I know there's a lot more steps to film photography than just picking up a digital camera and snapping away. But honestly, all the different steps that you have to take make the whole process a lot more enjoyable, and for me anyway, that's what I enjoy about using old film cameras. Just the feel of them, the noises that they make, the process of taking a film photo. Yeah, it's definitely an enjoyable part of it, even though at the start it can be a little overwhelming. So yeah, just roll on with it and you'll get used to things pretty quick. Using old film cameras is just fun, and you're obviously going to make mistakes along the way, but I think that makes getting it right even more satisfying. So hopefully this video was helpful, and I hope you learned something from it. So go grab some film, get out there and do some shooting. If you did find this one helpful, we would really appreciate it if you give the video a thumbs up and maybe subscribe if you want to see more. And also, please let me know in the comments what film camera you use. It's always intriguing. I love hearing about different people's cameras and how they like them. And if you want to jump in the Discord, there's quite a few film fanatics in there too, who you can chat with, and they could probably help you out with a few things too if you have some problems. So yeah, happy shooting, and as we always say, take it easy, don't be a stranger.